Hello, today I'm starting a video lecture series to go over the different branches of our government here in the US. We will be covering the government on both the federal and the state levels, with the focus on the state of Illinois. We're hoping to increase voter advocacy in both the state of Illinois, hopefully on the federal level. You never know how these will go. And we hope to do that by increasing voter education on how our government works. Hopefully these videos will provide you with an informative review going into this year's election, um, because our democratic system here in the US can be confusing, but democratic systems work best when voters know what's going on and know where to put their values in their vote. Today, we will be starting with the federal legislative branch of government. So without further ado, I will share my screen and we'll get going. Alrighty. So the federal legislative branch and why voting for elections within this branch is important. So the federal government has three branches. There's the legislative branch, which we're covering today, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch is comprised of state representatives, or the House of Representatives, senators, which every state has two, and combined, they are known collectively as Congress. So there's two bodies within Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Where do legislative powers come from? Where does Congress get their powers? Their powers are defined within Article 1 of the United States Constitution. This is also where their authority to their powers are granted. The responsibilities include enacting law. That's kind of what they're known for. Enacting legislation, creating law, and investigative powers. So this is, with all the impeachment hearings we've had recently, the legislative branch are the people responsible for holding those. So what is the difference between the House of Representatives and the Senate? Well, for starters, there's a different amount of people in each body of Congress. You have 435 members of the House of Representatives, and there's 100 members of the Senate. And this is broken up because each state has 2 senators, so 50 states, 100 senators, but 435 members of the House of Representatives, those are divided proportionately by the populations of each state. So the more populated a state is, the more representatives they'll have. Within the state of Illinois, we have 17 legislative districts, and each of those districts have a member of the House. I presently live in the 6th voting district of Illinois, and my current congressman, my current representative is Sean Casten. So who do they represent? Again, the senators, they represent the entire state. So there's 2 senators per state. In Illinois, we currently have Tammy Duckworth and Dick Durbin, and they represent everyone in Illinois when they're in Washington, D.C. But the members of the House represent specifically their district within their state. So you can see kind of up here on the map near Chicago, District 6, that small chunk, that's where I live. My representative only represents the people that live within that portion of the state. You can also find, if you don't know who your representative is, I've provided a link here for you to be able to look up who your representative is. It is the 6th footnote down here. So another difference between the 2 bodies of Congress is the frequency of their elections. House members are up for re-election every 2 years. So they will be fighting for re-election in every midterm and every main election. So the next one coming up in November of 2024, but then again in 2026, they'll be up for re-election. And then senators, they're up for re-election every 6 years. So sometimes they'll be up for re-election during the midterm, sometimes they'll be up for re-election during the main election, which again is happening this November. So the main process of, or the main function of the legislative branch is to legislate, to create laws, to enact laws. This is a very complex process. And as much as I would love to describe it for you in full, which I actually did, and it was going to take many minutes, I figured it would be better to instead play this fun little music video from back in the day.
You sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee. But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." And he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will. But today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably. Otherwise, I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm going to live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill. He signed your bill. Now you're a law. Oh, yes.
Okay, so as we just saw, that was the legislative process, how bills become laws. Again, I think that was a much more fun way to have it be described because I'm not that musically talented. Some notes on the video, however, a bill can be introduced in either the House of Representatives or the Senate. So in the music video, they showed the bill start within the House of Representatives, and then after it was passed within the House, it went over to the Senate. It can actually start in the Senate, be presented in Senate, passed by a majority vote in the Senate, and then go to the House to be passed by a majority vote before going to the president. This process of starting in one body of the Congress and then going, so the lower chamber, known as the House, and then the upper chambers, which is the Senate, and then going to the other side after passing by a majority vote. This is known as bicameralism, which is kind of just in the word, like bi, was two. So there's two separate bodies of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. And in order for anything to become a law, it needs to be passed by both bodies of Congress. And so a function of our democracy is bicameralism. So within the video, they also talked about a presidential veto if even a bill is passed by both bodies of Congress with a majority vote. the president can still deny the law or the bill from becoming a law. But when it goes back to the bodies of Congress, they can override the veto by voting with a 2/3 majority for the bill to become a law. So this will happen again in both bodies. So for this to happen, 2/3 votes, how many votes would each body of Congress need? Well, the Senate would need 67 votes because there's 100 of them. That's a bit easier of math to do than 435. What's 2/3 of 435? I'll give you a second if you want to try to figure it out, but 2/3 of 435 is 290 votes. So if it gets 290 votes in the House of Representatives and 67 votes in the Senate after a presidential veto, the bill can still become a law. So upon the president's approval, or after a presidential veto and a 2/3 vote, the bill will finally become a law, and that is how legislation works. Other congressional powers that I think are less talked about. So both chambers have the power to implement the annual budget for the government. We know as of recently, there's been some conflicts over the budgets and the budget hearings and everything. There was a lot of filibusters. There was a government shutdown. There was a lot of things going on recently. So it's kind of important because without the legislative branch collaborating effectively, the government will shut down if they can't agree on the annual budget. They also have the sole power to declare war, which has happened 11 times, I believe, in history. But I feel like that's something not talked about a lot. I think a lot of people think that the president has the power to declare that, but it's actually the legislative branch. So powers that the Senate specifically has. So the 100 members of the Senate specifically have the power to ratify treaties. And they do this by, again, a 2/3 majority vote, so 67 votes. They also have the power to approve presidential appointments. So this is like the president's cabinet members, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Education. Each president picks their own cabinet members, and they go through a Senate hearing to get approved for their position. The House of Representatives, they have the ability to impeach federal officers. Again, we've seen quite a few impeachment hearings happen as of late, and they have the ability to elect the president in case of an electoral college tie. So the electoral college we'll cover briefly real quick. Each state we talked about earlier, they have representatives that are given proportionately by their population. So the electoral college is our voting system when a state votes in when a state decides who they're voting for after they go through and tally all the votes. All of those votes for most states will go to one of the presidential candidates. So in Illinois, we have 17 House members, 2 senators. We have 19 electoral college votes. That's how each are calculated. So if a state has 1 member of the House and they have 2 senators, they'll have 3 votes for the electoral college. So the bigger the population of the state, the more electoral college votes they have. The total number of electoral college votes is 538, and this is the 100 members of the Senate. This is how it's easy for to represent in your head. Think it's the 100 members of the Senate plus the 435 members of the House, which is 535, and those last 3 votes come from Washington, D.C. They get 3 electoral college votes as well, because even though they're not represented in our legislative branch, they still have votes. So it's important for them to be represented. So this is an even number, obviously. So 538 divided by 2 is 269. So if either side is unable to get a majority of those 538 votes, there are multiple things that happen afterwards to try to find the correct, the person who won the election, which has never happened, likely never will happen, but a TV show did cover it once. So here's what happens if no one wins the electoral college.
my fellow Americans, I stand before you this morning in barefaced awe of the majesty of our democratic system. What a night. Yesterday, across our great land, you went to the polls and you voted. And whether you voted for me or my opponent, I want to thank you for doing your patriotic duty. In a democracy such as ours, it falls to the people to choose their president, and that is what you attempted to do last night. Now, when you voted, you had every reason to believe that no matter who won, by this morning there would be a clear outcome, and we would all know I was going to be president or my opponent for the next 4 years. However, that is not the case. As it turned out, there is a virtually unprecedented tie in the Electoral College, a somewhat arcane institution that many scholars believe we should do away with. I wish to say on a personal note how honored I am that although there is a tie in the Electoral College, I am most privileged to have won the popular vote. I am truly humbled by this unequivocal statement of your support for the many bold initiatives we have undertaken during my brief time in office so far. Thank you. And though this time may be frustrating to some, I want to assure the American people and our friends and allies around the world, as well as our enemies, that the founding fathers, in their infinite wisdom, anticipated just such an eventuality and have provided a mechanism to resolve it. It is a fair and appropriately judicious method to decide a matter that is so important. It is not, however, instantaneous. So, I must ask for your patience for the time it will take for the founders' brilliant plan to run its course. Senator O'Brien and I have been in contact, and he has pledged his support and loyalty to both the office of the presidency and the person who holds it. As someone with a lifetime of public service, Bill certainly understands better than almost anyone how crucial it is that we speak with one voice and unite behind the sitting president as the leader of the free world. And make no mistake, our country is not leaderless. I remain as your president, with my hand firmly on the tiller of the ship of state. Your government is still open for business. So remember, no matter who you voted for, I am your president. And with God's grace, you and I will never stop working together to create a more perfect union. Thank you all. God bless you. And may God bless the United States of America.
So that was a clip from very funny political satire Veep, in which the main character of the show, who was the sitting president, was up for re-election, and the Electoral College was a draw, so they had to go through the processes of what happens next. And what happens next, which wasn't really described in that video, was the vote then turns to the House of Representatives, those 435 members of the House who represent specific districts of their state. And they'll vote, and whoever wins the majority of those votes becomes the next president. And thank God 435 is an odd number. So to wrap things up, the legislative branch is both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Collectively, they're known as Congress. I think this is often confusing because the terms often get conflated. Congress, although it's used to talk about both the House and the Senate, like if someone says congressman, they're talking about a member of the House. Congressman means a member of the House versus senator means a member of the Senate. Congress means both. The founding fathers intended for the members of the House to be the closest to the everyday citizen, which is why they represent smaller communities in each state. This is also kind of why they're up for re-election more frequently, because They're supposed to be the closest to the everyday man, and they want the everyday man to be heard. It's important for the everyday man's voice to be present with what the everyday man actually is thinking, and not in office forever without the everyday man getting to change their mind. The 435 members of the House are divided proportionately by each state's population. Again, we already talked about this, but this is reevaluated every 10 years through the census. This is one of the reasons for the census. So the members of the House will always stay 435, but the amount of representatives each state gets will change every 10 years. Illinois actually just lost a district. I believe we went in 2020, we had 18 congressional districts and we went down to 17. So we used to have 20 electoral college votes. Now we're down to 19. And the number of electoral votes, again, we already talked about this. Each state gets, it's the number of House of Representatives they have, plus the number of senators, which is 2. So why vote? We talked about the legislative branch. Why is it important for you to get out there and use your vote? Well, congressional members create law. Therefore, it is important in a democratic system where the people get to use their voice to elect candidates that best represent their values. Because we have people making laws that we have to follow. These laws should represent our morals and values as citizens. And these are the people that are directly doing that. So if you want to have a say, a direct say in our government and our government processes, you have to vote for the people making the laws and making those changes. Every state has 2 senators, but every citizen has 1 representative, regardless of where they live. Again, you are represented by 1 member of the House. You have 1 congressman that represents you. You can go back earlier in the presentation to find that link to find yours. If you have questions, concerns, you can always call your congressman and voice, what concern you have locally, because they represent you locally. And if you're ever confused about what's going to be on the upcoming ballot for the upcoming election, you can go to your county's, the county clerk's website. So if you live in Cook County, it would be the Cook County Clerk website. DuPage County, where I live, would be the DuPage County Clerk website. And they provide you with sample ballots so you can see what's on the upcoming election if you don't know. And that way you don't show up to vote and you don't know what all the sections and categories are. That's happened to me before. The person running the forest preserve is sometimes up for re-election and I don't know what they do. But if I see them on the sample ballot, I can look up what their jobs are, what their responsibilities are, and I can look up the candidates and see what values they have. That way you're prepared for every single thing that is on the ballot. So that is all we have today for the first lecture in our series. Again, I will be covering the executive and judicial branches of the federal government, and I will be doing the legislative, executive, and judicial branches for the state of Illinois. So hopefully voters in Illinois will have a great refresher before we go into the election this November. So thanks for listening today, and hopefully you listen to more.